Hello, welcome to Doctor Talks. This is your host, Vivek. Here we chat with the best doctors about diseases and conditions they treat. Our guest today is Dr. Manoj Pradhan. Dr. Manoj is a leading name in cardiothoracic surgery in Pune and Maharashtra. He has experience of over 26 years in cardiothoracic surgery. Dr. Pradhan's specialty is carrying out high risk surgeries on patients with serious complications like kidney failure, respiratory complications, etc., who are typically refused surgical options by other cardiac centers because of the risk involved. He specializes in complex beating heart bypass surgeries and heart failure surgeries. He also advises on lifestyle modification to reduce heart disease. As we say, prevention is better than cure. Dr. Manoj has many firsts in Pune to his credit. For example, first, multiple total arterial bypass grafting, first, minimally invasive coronary bypass, first, beating heart surgery using the octopus, and first, beating heart surgery using the AMED device. First, endoscopic radial artery harvesting, which eliminates the large, ugly scars on the hand. Currently, Dr. Manoj is a consultant cardiothoracic surgeon at NM Wadia Institute of Cardiology, Jahangir Apollo Hospital, Ruby Hall Clinic, and Mangeshkar Hospital, Pune. Dr. Manoj is also a founder of Athena Heart Care, an organization dedicated to providing comprehensive, high quality heart care to all. I am happy to welcome Dr. Manoj. Dr. Manoj, welcome to Dr. Talks.
Thank you, Vivek. It's my pleasure to be on Dr. Talks.
Today, I would start this discussion on the topic of coronary heart disease. And as a first question, I would like to understand from you what is coronary heart disease?
Right, Vivek. This is a problem that is affecting mankind all over the world. To understand what is coronary heart disease, what you have to understand is that it refers to a disease of the arteries of your heart, not primarily of the heart itself. Now, as a further understanding, what you should know is that as we get older, our skin starts wrinkling, our hair starts going gray. What happens to the arteries inside our body? Well, the arteries that supply blood to all the organs, including the heart, start getting coated with deposits of fat and sometimes calcium. And as these keep on increasing, you will find that they start reducing the diameter of the artery that supplies blood to the heart muscle. When that becomes significant enough, you get what is called as coronary artery disease that causes heart attacks. And once you have heart attacks, you have all the other complications that come along with it.
And how do you go about diagnosing a coronary heart disease?
That's a very good question, Vivek. First of all, the diagnosis of coronary heart disease or coronary artery disease can start in your own home if you are honest with yourself. What happens is, very often when a patient comes to me, he will say that I'm fine. Then I say the next question as to why have you come to me then? Then it is a wife that tells me that, oh, he's not been doing as much work as he is supposed to. He gets tired very easily. Now, what happens is a natural response of any human being is that if you find that you cannot walk a particular distance, you will not walk it. So, to suit the level of your fitness, there is a protection mechanism whereby the body reduces the amount of activity that it does. And in the modern world today, there are so many conveniences So if you find that you're unable to walk to, say, the shop to get something, you use a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. And it is only when you get breathless or you get pain to a point where you can't walk, that is when you seek medical help. So the first warning signs should actually come from the patient himself or herself, saying that, look, I don't think I've been able to do what I was able to do before, and I am actually feeling sick. Now, patients often come with history which is of something called angina. Now, angina is typically, by definition, a constricting feeling in your chest that causes you to stop walking or stop doing whatever activity you're doing, and which passes off the moment you stop doing that activity. But that is typical angina or chest pain. But very often you get atypical angina. Now, what is atypical angina? Atypical angina is when after walking you may get jaw pain, neck pain, left shoulder pain, right shoulder pain, or very simply after walking you suddenly start feeling bloated and you feel acidity and you feel like you've got indigestion. Now, this is things that happen when you're walking, and it is an early warning sign. But if you ignore these early warning signs, very often you will end up getting all these signs at rest, which means that you get pain immediately after eating food, you get acidity, you get pain in the neck, pain in the jaw or in the tooth. And all these are atypical signs that beyond a certain age need to be investigated. Now, the best investigation that you can do in such patients is a resting electrocardiogram or ECG and something called as a stress test. Now, very often nowadays, because of increased awareness of these problems, we have patients who are totally asymptomatic, which means that they really do not have any symptoms whatsoever, but have just heard that it is a good idea to get investigated. Some are forced to do these investigations as a routine health check, which has been paid by the office that they work in, or sometimes by the insurance company that is insuring them. Now, when something like this happens and you pick up something that is unexpected, believe me, it is the best thing that can happen to you because it's been picked up before you have any symptoms and before it has caused any damage to your heart. Other than that, the other test that is commonly done is something called as a 2D echocardiogram. Now, this is nothing but an ultrasound for your heart, which tells you that the contractions of the heart are normal or abnormal, whether the valve structures in your heart are working well or not, and if they are, what is the percentage of the function of the heart as opposed to what would be considered normal. Now, all these are totally looked at by the cardiac specialist to whom you go, and then an opinion is given as to what else is required. Now, suppose any of these are abnormal, including something like a stress test. Now, what is a stress test? Is nothing but an ECG or an electrocardiogram that is done while you are walking, while sometimes when you're walking up a steep incline, and if you can tolerate it, actually at running speeds. If your stress test comes back as totally normal, it is interpreted as a negative stress test, which means that you have nothing to fear from the heart. However, there are people who have borderline positive stress tests and who get unnecessarily worried sometimes because the stress test depends on how soon you achieve something called as a target heart rate. Now, your target heart rate is determined by your age and level of fitness, and once you have reached that target heart rate, if you have to stop a test, it is quite okay. However, during the course of the test, if you start feeling uneasy, if you feel that you can't do it, that's when you have to tell the physician who is doing the test to stop it. Or if the physician notices some abnormal changes on your ECG, he will ask you to stop it prematurely. That is the baseline investigation that you do. Once these tests are done, the doctor may often tell you that, well, it's normal, you have nothing to fear about, or that there is something and we need to do an angiography. Now, an angiography that can be done is something to the tune of two types of angiography. One is something called as a CT coronary angiogram. Now, CT coronary angiogram is something that is done in a CT scanner where you have to hold your breaths for about 15 to 20 seconds, during which a CT scan rapidly takes sections of your heart and the arteries, and it tells you if your arteries have got disease or not. CT scans have been getting better, but they are still not 100% accurate, and you may tend to underestimate or overestimate the blockages if they are found on a CT scan, which is why a regular coronary angiogram, which is done after you're admitted to the hospital, is something which is considered as the gold standard. Now, once a coronary angiogram is done, that is when a doctor would be able to tell you what is the exact nature of the disease that you have, whether it is a significant blockage, and how it is to be addressed.
Doctor, you did mention that one of the causes of coronary heart disease is as we get aged, there are deposits in our artery. Can you detail out more that what are the causes and risk factors for coronary heart disease?
Right. Vivek, it is this way. All of us, as we get older, will get deposits of what we call as plaques, which are cholesterol deposits tinged by calcium sometimes. But there are some of us who get it more than the others. Now, why does it occur more in some people and less in the others? It is your lifestyle to blame primarily. Now, when I say lifestyle to blame, what do I actually mean? The commonest and the most responsible factor for this is mental stress. Now, when we talk of stress, people say, oh no, I'm not stressed at all. Wife will say, oh, he's pretty cool. But what is stress? Stress is your response to the environment that you live in, to people around you. And stress is something that modern day lifestyle exposes all of us to. It is how we react to it that makes it different. In addition, there is something else that is important, which is that if you are a sedentary lifestyle person, which means that you do not believe in any kind of physical activity at all, that you believe that you should not be doing any exercise, what happens is your body starts accumulating the food that you eat because it is no longer used for purposes of expending energy or making you move. Now, as a result, what happens is whatever the body does not need gets stored in the body as fat, and we get something called as a metabolic syndrome, whereby you get girth obesity, or it is called a metabolic syndrome where the patient's girth keeps increasing, the waistline increases, but the arms and the legs remain the same. And typically, he would notice that his or her trousers start getting tighter. Most of us do not have weighing machines at home, so we don't know unless we go to a doctor's place that you have actually put on weight. But the first sign is that your pants become tight. And a very simple solution for that is you go and buy a new set of trousers. But it is the first warning sign that you get. And if you start putting on weight, especially around your abdomen and your chest, that is something that is eventually going to lead to various problems. Now, what are the various problems obesity or increased weight leads to? One is diabetes, hypertension, or high blood pressure. Then comes the secondary effects, which is that your joints start giving way earlier because they've got to support a lot more weight. And finally, you can get heart disease. So, can obesity by itself cause heart disease? Well, not by itself, but it causes it through various effects. And then I mentioned this as the last factor, but it is something worth mentioning because very often you will find people who are extremely thin and who look very fit coming with heart attacks or coronary artery disease. So, why does that happen? Well, there is a genetic basis to this, and it is typically seen in people who have a hereditary kind of heart disease where the father or the mother's side, all brothers or all sisters, tend to have this. And if that happens, you have to be extra careful. Heart disease will probably come to you earlier than in the others. So, what does happen is that though you're thin, you will end up being diabetic, which again is a congenital thing sometimes, which is something that is genetic. And for that, you cannot have anything but to control your sugars well.
Once a person is diagnosed with a coronary heart disease, what are the treatment options?
First thing that a doctor would look at when he is presented with a patient who has got coronary artery disease is what is the general fitness level like, what is the amount of exertion he does, what is the risk of him developing a heart attack if he has not had one already, and of course, the main thing being totally honest with the patient and telling him that this is what the situation is and this is what you need. Now, the treatment options are many. Quite a few of the patients have what we call as minor blockages that do not need any kind of intervention apart from medical therapy. Now, when we talk of medical therapy, it is giving tablets and nothing else. So, what would the tablets do? If you have high blood pressure, the tablets control your blood pressure. If you have diabetes, the tablets can control diabetes. If your cholesterol is high, then there are tablets to control cholesterol as well. And very often we add something which is a blood thinner, which is something called aspirin. A common lowly aspirin works very well as a blood thinner, and that is given. And very often, with this much, the patient actually improves just by giving these medications. Now, if he continues to have chest pain, then we may add tablets called as nitrates, which cause an increase in diameter of the coronary arteries, thereby improving the blood flow. However, if you have on the angiography multiple blockages that are significant, now what is meant by significant? A blockage in an artery that shows a diameter narrowing of more than 50%, which means that 50% narrowing of that artery at that point is enough to cause a 75% area narrowing and enough to cause a significant reduction in blood flow. And when you have something like this, medicine alone is not enough to ensure your safety because we want to prevent that heart attack from coming, or we want to make sure that you don't get another heart attack. So then what do we do? At that time, depending on the number of blockages that are there, a doctor will advise you either an angioplasty with stents or a bypass.
What is coronary bypass grafting?
Coronary artery bypass grafting is a very simple operation in terms of principles. What it does is construct a new pathway for pure blood to flow to your heart muscle, leaving the blockages as they are. In a coronary artery bypass grafting, the cardiac surgeon does not take away the blockage, he only takes away the bad effects of the blockage by improving the blood flow to the heart muscle which that artery supplies. Now, we say it's simple because today, after many years of its existence, coronary artery bypass grafting was first done in 1967. Things have got so much better and so much safer that it becomes a fairly simple operation in an uncomplicated situation. So, what we do is the surgeon will take an artery or a vein from the patient's other parts of the body, which is the artery is normally taken from the left or right hand or the chest, and a vein is taken from the leg, which is called a saphenous vein. So, by taking these bits, what you do is you use them to construct the alternative pathway that is required for blood flow. And once that is done, blood flows normally, and lo behold, you will find that the patient actually stops complaining of all the problems that he used to have and is able to do a lot more than what they normally do. There are so many patients of mine who are indulging in active sporting lifestyle, playing tennis, swimming, going out for a run, going out for long walks, all this is possible because your blood flow normalizes.
And I would come to the comparison bit little later. But before that, if you can elaborate more on what is an angioplasty with stents, so that our audience can understand the difference by the simple definition itself.
Okay, going by definition, Vivek, a cardiac surgeon does a bypass while a cardiologist does an angioplasty. Now, what is the basic difference between the two? A bypass bypasses the obstruction. An angioplasty goes through the obstruction, dilates the blockage that is there with a balloon, and then the cardiologist inserts a stent, which is a small ball pen kind of spring that is put inside the artery where the blockages were, so that the block does not recoil again. And when that happens, the blood flow normalizes. So it is like repairing the existing road rather than building a new one to bypass the traffic. So an angioplasty is the first option that is considered by a cardiologist and a cardiac surgeon when an angiogram is done. Because if it is a discrete blockage, which means it's a small blockage in a small area and the rest of the artery is completely normal, then you can easily do an angioplasty with stenting at the same setting as the angiogram. The advantage is that you don't need two procedures. So though you may have a 90% block in one artery, you can have that one stent put in all in the same setting as the angiogram, and the patient is in the hospital for 2 days and goes home feeling absolutely fine. It's a wonderful procedure when it is done in an appropriately indicated setting, which means that all patients, the first choice is always, let me avoid a bypass, because a bypass involves cutting open the patient's chest, while an angioplasty does not require any incision or any cutting open of the chest. It is done just through a small needle that is put in the groin. So, attractive though it may be, it is not the be all and end all of the treatment, and it is not applicable for all patients.
Now, doctor, that brings me to a important question: is out of the two approaches which you just shared, how does a patient chooses between them? What are the factors which should be used in decision making?
Vivek, ideally, the patient should not be doing the choosing because he is not in a position to make that choice. Because a doctor, their cardiac specialist, maybe a surgeon, maybe a physician, maybe a cardiologist, knows the procedure, knows its effects, knows its complications. And when a particular doctor advises a particular form of treatment, it is done keeping in mind all these factors and saying that, look, for you, treatment A would be a better choice. But the doctor, what he does is he also discusses the other options, which means that if a patient has to undergo a bypass, we will tell him that, look, these are the options that are available. However, for you, a bypass is the one that is suited because angioplasty is not possible or not advisable. Now, this is a very important distinction between the two, that all patients would say, why don't you do an angioplasty? Now, I give them an example of climbing a mountain. I said that everyone can climb a mountain, but should everyone do it? So there's a question of whether it is feasible. For a person, it is feasible to climb a mountain. But is it advisable to climb a mountain? Not everyone can, because you're not trained to do it. So it's essentially the same situation where sometimes angioplasties are doable, which means they are feasible. But if you do them, you don't get the long-term effects that you desire. Now, what do I mean by that? Every procedure that one does has got a complication or an effect, that what we are doing is we are only turning back the clock by a few years. So when you do an angioplasty, normally if you get a result where the angioplasty stent lasts for 5 years or 10 years, you know that it has been a good choice and it has lasted you. So you have pushed forward whatever was going to happen about 5 to 10 years from the time you do the angioplasty. With a bypass, rightly done, rightly indicated, patients can expect to live up to 25 to 30 years if they take good care of themselves. So a doctor looks at that which would give the most longevity, which would give the best results in terms of physical activity, and then it is advised. Now, there are very often situations where a bypass is required because of the multiple blockages. But the patient is not fit to undergo such a bypass because while trying to undergo the bypass, it should not cause more damage, should not cost his life. So that's the point when a doctor would say that, look, though bypass would be the first treatment of choice for you, I don't think you are fit enough to undergo it, and I would do a limited angioplasty, which means that try to do whatever is possible and try to see what improvement can occur. So these are the changes that come. Very rarely, after an angiogram, even if everything is blocked, we may tell a patient that you are neither fit for an angioplasty nor a bypass. So you have to be on medical management and hope that you can carry on living for as long as possible. Now, that happens very rarely, but it does happen.
Doctor, you made a very important point that it's not for the patient to decide. A patient should depend upon the advice and the input of expert or specialist doctors in this case and go as per the treatment option suggested by them. So now that's very important because many times we tend to kind of get into picking and choosing our treatment options by ourselves. And in this case, as you mentioned clearly, the decision is best left to the experts. Now, how would you compare the risk factors for both coronary bypass grafting and angioplasty with stents?
It's like actually comparing apples and oranges. Each treatment has its own place, and each treatment has its own complications. What happens is that if you do a bypass, okay, there are complications where a patient feels that it's a big incision, you're going to get pain. All these are minor complications or they are minor complaints. Most of the times, these do not become an important factor at all. What is important though is that if a bypass is advised, a patient is just too frail. We call it a frailty index, which means that someone who is, say, 35 or 40 kilograms, so they have hardly any muscle mass. They don't have much immunity to withstand the operation. In such patients, we tell them that though you need to have a bypass, I don't think you should have it. The same way for an angioplasty, I may be able to angioplasty 1 out of the 4 arteries. But if the other 3 are going to cause trouble at some point in time, we tell them that, look, you should, though you can do an angioplasty for this 1 artery, I think you should have a bypass. So what are the complications of a bypass? Well, during the course of a bypass, you could have a heart attack. Your kidneys, if they are bad, can get worse. You could have other complications like bleeding. You can have complications like your lungs are weak and you are unable to come off the ventilator. All these are what we consider as major complications. They are very patient specific, which means that the doctor is able to warn a patient that I think this is a situation and these are the chances of you getting a complication. Or there are some people who have blockages in the arteries that supply blood to the brain. Now, if that be the case, if those blockages are significant enough, very often we have to deal with that before we do a bypass. So that is called a carotid endarterectomy or a carotid artery stenting. All these things are discussed with the patient before we actually advise a particular line of treatment, which is why I come back to my point again, that ideally the decision should be taken by doctors who are adequately trained, which means that I normally tell my patients that you are welcome to a second opinion, but please take a second opinion from one more surgeon and one more cardiologist. Now, why is that important? I've had patients who have said, so and so doctor has told me not to undergo a bypass. Now, it turns out that so and so doctor is not a cardiac qualified doctor at all. And if such a person were to say, don't do a particular procedure, it's like shooting in the dark. He doesn't know it, but he has just heard that it is not a good procedure to do, so you should not do it. So that would be wrong advice, and it is disservice to the patient. Then there is something called as a physician bias, which patients think play a very important role. Now, I would say that it does not play that much of an important role now, because what was said was that a surgeon will always say, do a surgery, while a angiographer or a cardiologist will always say, do an angioplasty. That is not really true, because in today's day and age of litigation, none of the doctors want to be caught out on the wrong foot. So if I advise a particular patient that you need to have a bypass, I actually commit myself, I write it down on paper and giving out the reasons why I think he should have an angioplasty or a bypass. So these are all very, very important things, because complications for an angioplasty are not less severe. In fact, you can lose your life even during an angioplasty. And very often, if an angioplasty goes wrong, it is the surgeon who comes to the rescue by taking up for an emergency bypass. And what can cause this? Well, there is something called as a rupture of the artery. There is something called as a dissection of the artery while an angioplasty is going on. And if that happens, unless a surgeon is nearby, the patient often loses his life because he gets a massive heart attack. So all these are complications. All these are some things that you have to discuss with your doctor before we actually do anything.
Now, doctor, you made a very important point in terms of the patient's fear. What, in fact, I have even observed, and myself also, if I put myself in such a situation as a patient, I would be always inclined to avoid a surgery, and something like, say, a bypass surgery, which requires a surgery of heart. Normal human would be not inclined to it and might end up choosing angioplasty, or say might be a little anxious about it. How do you handle such fears of patient?
Well, counseling is the most important thing, which is why when a patient comes to me for an opinion regarding surgery, you could see there's fear in their eyes. They are hoping that I would say nothing is required. So, what you have to do is, in a professional and calm manner, tell them what is the situation, what is needed, what could be the possible complications, but what are the chances of that particular complications occurring to the particular patient when he or she is in front of me. And most of the times, if a patient comes early enough and in good time, a coronary bypass grafting has got a risk of less than 1 to 2%, which means that 98 to 99 patients out of 100 will walk home alive, well, and cured for at least 20 to 25 years of their life. So the problem is that there is a generalization that occurs, which means that if you hear of someone, a friend or a relative who underwent a bypass and who had a complication, one always thinks that that happens to everyone. It's not so. It is very, very patient specific. And today, with the newer techniques in bypass surgery, which is a total arterial bypass, multiple beating heart bypass using an octopus, all these things are way, way less frequent than what they used to be. However, if a patient comes to me who has just recently had a heart attack and who's having continuous pain and I need to operate on him, well, the risk is going to be higher. Now, if such a patient has a complication and his relative were to generalize it and say that, well, my so and so had a complication during a bypass, so it must be a bad procedure. It's not that. Neither the patient is bad, neither the procedure is bad, nor the doctor is bad. It is the circumstances which are bad, and which is why I urge patients, please come early enough, please come as soon as you feel any problems, so that when you are treated, you get the best possible results. Now, with an angioplasty, what tends to happen is that a patient does not wish to get operated, so he will try and force the cardiologist to do an angiogram and an angioplasty, saying, I don't want to undergo a bypass, please do whatever is possible. So then what do doctors do? The cardiologist would do something called as a staged angioplasty, which means that I don't want to do 4 stents altogether. So I will do 2 stents on one day, then allow the patient to recover a little bit, and then try and do two stents on the other day. That is not really an advisable way to do it, and it is not something that was the first choice of treatment anyway. But because the patient insisted, the doctor is trying to comply. But believe me, it is only short term gain, because what happens is, you as a patient, you are frightened of an incision, frightened of an operation, so you try to take the easier route out. But that easier route out is going to land you in trouble in terms of a repeat heart attack, say within a matter of 2 to 3 years. Then it was not the procedure that was required in the first place anyway. So you have to follow the advice that you get. Do not use your brains where you have got no knowledge of. Or the commonest problem that we get nowadays is relatives who go onto the internet the moment a doctor starts talking and try to get, we call them Google doctors. So they see a particular condition and say, Google says it should be done this way, why aren't you doing it that way? Or Google says that this is the right way of doing things. So when that happens, it is very difficult to explain to a relative or the patient himself, because the patient wants to hear that particular thing, that Google said that an angioplasty can be done, so why should you not do it? And that is a new challenge that all of us as doctors face, that is trying to tell the patient what is right and what is wrong. And then very often they find a particular person who's willing to comply with their wishes, and they have an angioplasty when they should ideally have had a bypass, and they end up coming up too early after an angioplasty for a bypass. And we have been seeing a lot of repeat procedures, as I call it, whereby a patient has had an angioplasty with stenting done about 3 months back, 4 months back. The stents have got blocked, and they have come back for surgery in a much worse condition than when I had first seen them. I would urge all patients, please take a second opinion from qualified people, that is cardiac qualified people, and follow the person that puts you most at ease. Doctors have got a way of talking. There's some doctors who are extremely successful, who do a lot of operations per day, but who have very little time to dedicate to you as an individual, as opposed to some doctors who will do the limited amount of work but give you all the time in the world that is required. Remember something, an heart surgery or an angioplasty is something where complications can occur at any time, and at that time, the doctor who has done it is the person who is the best person to treat it, because he knows what he has done, he knows what can go wrong. So you should listen to the doctor, and you should choose a doctor wisely, is all I would say. Choose the procedure even more wisely by listening to the doctors who are there.
Doctor, can you touch a bit on the post surgery rehabilitation for both the procedures?
Okay, that's a very good question, Vivek, because again, in comparison, it is something like apples and oranges again. When you have an incision on your chest, when your body is recovering, you are going to take much longer to recover than if you have an angioplasty. Now, when you have an angioplasty, you are home on the second or third day. You are walking as usual by the end of the week. And very often now, patients are going back to their normal work within a matter of 2 weeks. So it is almost as if no procedure has been done at all. What does happen though is that any procedure that you have undergone will drain your energy to a certain extent, and as a result, the patient starts feeling tired earlier than before. But with an angioplasty, there are very few restrictions, as in do not drive your car, do not lift anything heavy. Though it is not advisable to do it, people still do it, and they feel it is absolutely okay. Now, with a surgeon, what happens is the surgeon will tell you that you had a big operation, so you will go out for a walk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, and do not lift anything heavy, do not drive a vehicle, come and see me after 15 days, and basically do not go to work for at least 2 months. So it sounds like such a huge thing that involves a major change in lifestyle for the patient, at least for the 2 months that the patient undergoes surgery. But I tell my patients that if you have undergone surgery, the rehab is going to be long, but you get better results. So it is a long term gain. So you undergo a short kind of pain for a long term gain, because that is what is going to give you a better quality of life for a longer duration. As opposed to that, an angioplasty, quick recovery, but blockages will come again pretty soon. The stents can get blocked pretty soon. And when that happens at that point of time, we always look at a possibility that you need to undergo a bypass. The bypass is the be all and end all as far as things go. The other thing is, it's been proven by multiple studies that have been done that if a diabetic patient has got multiple blockages in his arteries of the heart, the treatment that best serves him is a bypass and not an angioplasty. That patients who are diabetics, if they undergo stenting, tend to have an earlier closure of the stents and an increased incidence of a heart attack. This has been proven by multiple studies, and which is why if you get a diabetic with multiple blockages, even today, where stents have got safer, more attractive, even then they are first advised a bypass surgery.
Doctor, would you be able to share with us a case of coronary bypass grafting which you had treated? And you did not share the name of the patient, but in general, what was the challenge and how you managed it?
Okay, Vivek, there are so many patients that we encounter, each with having a different set of problems. As I said, we study the patient completely. We do all the investigations before we actually recommend something. But sometimes we are backed into a corner. So even after my 26, 27 years of experience, there are times when you feel that this is something that is so challenging that it requires a little bit more than my normal time. Now, one such patient was operated a few years back, a 46-year-old gentleman who was otherwise apparently healthy, had gone to a hospital with chest pain, was diagnosed to have a heart attack, following which he had something called as a primary angioplasty, which means that because there was a blockage that was identified that could have been treated, an angioplasty and stenting was done. Now, thereafter, the patient seemed to be okay, except that he had some fever and stuff like that, and was being treated for the fever with antibiotics. And about a month after his primary procedure of the heart attack and the uh, angioplasty that he came in with what we call as left ventricular failure, which means that he had severe breathlessness at rest. He was unable to lie down, and emergency admission was required. At that particular time, they came to another hospital, which was the place where I was, and having stabilized him first by giving all the medications and all, we realized that he had suffered another massive heart attack. So we actually did a coronary angiogram again, and what we found was that the stent which was put had got blocked off. Other than that, he had multiple other blockages, so he needed a bypass. But the challenge to the bypass was that his heart function, which was normal before the procedure, had now gone down to 20%, which was really very low. In addition to that, he also had a valve that was leaking. So this gentleman required a bypass to be done along with replacing or changing the valve that was leaking, which is a mitral valve replacement. But because his blood pressure was so low, because his heart was so weak, he also needed an additional device called as an intra-aortic balloon pump to be put in before the surgery. So we did that for 24 hours prior to the operation, after which he was stabilized and I took him up for a bypass along with a mitral valve replacement. Both were done. The operation went off fairly well, and he was on a ventilator for about 2 days and thereafter came off without any problems. And he went home on day 8 or day 9 of the procedure. For me, it was one of the most challenging patients that I have operated on, and he did exceedingly well thereafter. But there are stories where you find that something like this should not happen. Just today, I had been called out to a hospital to see a patient who was 52 years old, had chest pain, had a heart attack, went to a hospital, had an angiogram that showed multiple blockages. The cardiologist, very rightfully so, told him that, look here, you have multiple blockages, you are diabetic, you are hypertensive, so you should only undergo a bypass. And the way the blockages are, please do it as soon as you can. The patient, of course, had other thoughts, and he decided to undergo a course in naturopathy and some Ayurvedic management. Now, this was way back in November 2020, and today, that's in February 2020, about a week ago, he was admitted to the hospital with severe left ventricular failure. He cannot do it without oxygen. His heart function is very low now. It is around 23%. And he needs to undergo a bypass. And when I told him that, look, you've been through all this, naturopathy was obviously not a choice, which was right, and you now need to undergo a bypass. And his answer was, I'm sorry, doctor, I will have to think about it, whether it is the right choice for me or not. So, Vivek, the story is the same. Here it is a patient taking the advice of someone, getting treatment that was not indicated, and having a problem. So, I do wish, as I said, that informed opinions are what should be taken. Follow the person who gives you the right advice, and you will be in good hands.
Dr. Manoj, it was my pleasure to have you on Dr. Talks. Thank you for sharing such detailed insights about coronary heart disease and the risk factors, what are the treatment options, and why a patient should listen to a doctor to decide the right course of treatment. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Vivek. It was my pleasure, and I hope that the audience listens to whatever we have said, and I wish them all the best in the future. And to the audience of Dr. Talks, keep tuned in because there would be a lot more information that would be coming your way. Thank you very much.
Dear listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dr. Talks, which informed and educated us about coronary bypass grafting vis-a-vis angioplasty with stents. Please share the podcast and do not forget to share your feedback on our website. Cheers till we meet next time.